They don't have a malt box here, do they? Oh, they do.
Mic test, testing 1, 2, 3. Should be mic level coming out of the box there. You can switch, cool. And then when we get closer, I'll click on these lights. Well, I can do it quick now. What are you guys getting for level? Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Check a good level. Okay. And what do you get for temperature? I'm just curious.
I'm at 68.
Okay. I have 'em daylight, so they should be. And it's mic level coming out of there. All right.
Everybody's good? Everybody's, I'm just making sure everybody's good to go, so when he comes out, everybody's got their sound check. Everybody's got that done? All right. I know Fox just got here. What's that? Yes. So check, just making sure everybody's good to go with sound and the white balance if you needed it. Superintendent Evans will be out shortly to provide updates on the DMT and where we are. Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Drew Evans, and I'm the superintendent here at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. We previously updated you on an issue that impacted our DMTs, or data master transportable machines that measure breath alcohol content that are deployed across the state of Minnesota. Since we first identified this issue, our BCA lab forensic scientists have now mathematically verified that all identified DWI evidentiary breath samples that were involved in these DMTs have been deemed to be accurate and reliable, and our scientists are prepared to testify to that in the process. This issue arose from a limited number of our machines where the dry gas cylinder, a control test, there were errors associated with the changing out of the particular cylinder that we talked about previously. This led to questions that we've told you about to determine whether or not these particular machines were producing reliable results in that process. And that is what we've been working on diligently, and we completed that mathematical examination today, and we want to provide that information to you. We first learned about this, as we said, in September when we had those errors in the changing of the process, and we halted testing at that point in time as we announced to you, and we requested all agencies examine their dry gas cylinder data to make sure that it was entered correctly. We also took immediate steps to prevent further issues and protect the integrity of those tests moving forward. What we did in that process is we've been reviewing the impacted instruments and the data associated with that in every single test that was performed on those particular instruments. We recalculated all affected tests using the correct gas cylinder concentration that should have been in the instrument, entered into the instrument. These recalculations have confirmed that the control tests remained within acceptable margins despite the data entry errors, meaning that the tests are reliable and accurate. Therefore, we are moving forward at this point in time and notifying the impacted agencies today for the law enforcement that had those instruments in their location of what these new updated results will be. As I said before, we stand behind the instruments and that the validity of the testing and the reliability of the instruments across Minnesota, and our scientists are prepared to testify to the results of the new calculations and the instruments that they have done for a long time. To prevent any future issues with that, only BCA personnel will be changing out those dry gas cylinders. Anytime there's a process with a lot of different human beings involved in it across the state, there's a possibility for an error to exist, and so we're narrowing the number of people that will be handling these instruments as we announced previously, so that we have a consistent process to ensure that they're changed out correctly in the instruments, and we'll be beefing up additional instruments in the field so that the entire instrument gets swapped out when an instrument no longer can be used because the dry gas has been depleted or there's an error with that. We've been going out and examining, as the BCA, these instruments in the field. We've completed over 50% of those examinations and anticipate completion of examination of all of them by the end of next week. Our DMT operator training has been updated to reflect those procedural changes and how that process will work, and we'll continue monitoring to ensure compliance and accuracy going forward. We, in an interest of being fully transparent, as we told you all from the beginning about this issue and why we announced and halted this testing process, we'll do the same, and we have a page on our website that provides updated information as we learn it, and we've been examining. And again, we just finished this just today, the mathematical equation, but we think it's important so that Minnesotans can trust that the results on these DMT instruments are reliable, accurate, and identify the breath alcohol concentration appropriately across the state. And so with that, I'd be happy to take questions. So as we announced before, that each case will need to be examined on a case-by-case basis. But with these calculations, we'll be issuing amended reports outlining what the impact of that was and the calculation that we went through, this mathematical equation, to determine the accuracy of those results. So that will get issued to each of the law enforcement agencies that will be amended to the file, and then the prosecutors and defense attorneys will be able to examine what the impact, if any, and there shouldn't be, to the case that's at hand. So with those, again, it's a similar process. They will have to be examined on a case-by-case basis. These amended results will be provided to law enforcement that will provide them to the prosecutors, and they'll make a determination what the next steps might be legally. Because there's 87 different counties and countless city attorney's offices and the Attorney General's office, each individual office will have to determine what impact that will have and if there is a path forward for any of those cases. Well, I think what we did today is demonstrate that there is trust in the instruments, in this process. What we've done in the process is change that so that we have a consistent process for the change of the dry gas cylinder in those instruments. As I said last time when we talked about this particular issue, we trust the reliability of these instruments, especially when all the proper steps are followed in this process, and so we've examined that. And then we've been working diligently through this process, why it's taken some time, just for that trust, so that we can go through and make sure that this mathematical equation we're using, it works. We've done it on cases where we have the known values as part of this to validate the mathematical equation internally, and then examine every single case. We didn't sample some of the cases in this equation. We looked at every case on the impacted instruments and found them all of them to be within the tolerance of the margin of error that we have associated with that instrument, which shows the instruments are valid and reliable. Yeah, so the issue is, and why we brought this forward to begin with, is that we hold ourselves to the highest standards of quality in our forensic laboratory and the instruments that we employ across the state. When there's any piece of that was not followed properly in our process, procedure, and outlined on the training to do this, is that we need to make sure that the test results were what we were saying they are. The issue was that the alcohol concentration on the dry gas cylinder was entered incorrectly. And so that is out of line with the training and the process for that particular instrument. And then we've been working back, can we recreate and make sure that we know what that particular value would be once we enter it correctly with that, showing that the results are still within that margin even with that improper entry in that process. So it's a long way of saying the tests are reliable and accurate, just like we said that the instruments were. The sample tests from the subjects that were arrested, we never questioned the validity of those particular results. It was this control. And we consider the sample test, the control, and the other sample test that's taken. There's 3 different pieces that go along with that. That is the totality of the test, and we need all those to be done properly. And so we had to go back and examine the data, and we found it's reliable. But we hold ourselves to such quality standards here that when there is a part of the process that's not followed correctly, we need to pause, take a step back, look at the data, and then we determine it's accurate.
So does it matter what numbers are entered in the machine then?
Yeah, it does matter. So it's a good question when it comes. If these machines were entered at a wildly different value, they would potentially have an impact in that process when we're going through. We only supply dry gas cylinder within a particular range. We know that they go out within a fairly narrow range to begin with in the value that the instrument is trying to compare to. If these were wildly different, it potentially could have impacted the case. But that's why we had to look at every single case going through. We did not know until we went through the mathematical examination of each individual test if we would find them to be reliable. But that's why we went through all of them individually. Well, operator error in terms of what happened in the process, but in terms of each individual machine, which again, when you have humans in the process that are involved in changing these out, those sorts of things happen. What's important now is that we've now identified that these errors were occurring and that we fixed the process, and moving forward, we've changed how we're going to do that to lessen the ability to have errors moving forward. And the process as we examine these machines, we've put in policies and practices that will identify them as they come in if there was an error, so that we would see that on the front end as opposed to when they're being examined in court. Oh, I don't know that question offhand. You know, we've had certainly our scientists had to go through hundreds of cases to take a look at that. But I think what's more important in this particular instance is that we give that affirmation to Minnesotans that the tests are reliable and that they can count on them, and that impaired drivers are held accountable for their conduct. And we revoke their license where appropriate to keep everybody safe. Thousands of dollars, probably. I don't know the exact number. I'd have to calculate it. Thanks, guys.